As I launch into this conversation, and this is the formal presentation of our Optimizing for Equity plan to support and engage more deeply in our strategic plan, Excellence for All, I do want to name very clearly my appreciation to all of those who've spent time with us over the last few weeks. Couple of weeks in conversations at schools, at the parent meetings, conversations with our staff members, board members have been there, members of our team have been there, community members, community providers. Several folks have just been engaged with us very fully and deeply in those conversations, and I want to name great appreciation for it. It has absolutely helped to sharpen our thinking about what we're proposing and helped us to identify some potential pitfalls as we consider moving forward with this. Optimizing for equity. As we consider the changes that we're proposing tonight and that we'll talk through in a bit, there are four big pieces here that really jump out and that are most important as we consider the benefits here. First and foremost, we've got to make sure that we've got equitable access to resources across the district. I've said to a few folks, and it's unfair, it's unfortunate, but depending on where you've graduated from school or where you attended within our district, your story and your experiences can be dramatically different, and that's not good, and that's something that we can control, and we must do something to ensure that there's equitable access to resources across the district. This is both for our scholars and for teachers. As well, we've got to continue to look at and develop ways to stabilize the school communities and our staffing. And building the kind of stability across schools where young people can have longer term relationships with their teachers and with their scholars. And right now we experience quite a bit of mobility for various reasons among scholars as well as the teachers. High quality instruction, full stop. We've got to find more and more ways and continue to identify and create ways for us to be better at teaching and learning, which is our core work. And part of that is a clear focus on professional development for our educators, not just our teachers, but educators more broadly stated. And then finally, fiscal sustainability. We know that we've got some challenges with our financial resources, and so the smarter we are about how we utilize those resources and how we get the greatest benefit and outcomes from the investments that we're making, the better off we'll be. Many of you have seen or have some knowledge about our enrollment trend over the last 9 to 10 years. The headline there is that we have seen considerable decline in our enrollment. Concretely stated, we've seen over 600 or 6,700 students leave our district since 2010, 2011, which is about 20% or more than 20% of our student enrollment. That's a huge decline. And I think most of us are aware that we haven't kept up with that decline in the way that the expenditures that we have within our district and the way that we organize ourselves. There's several reasons for the decline. Folks have left the city, so that's part of it, obviously. And so you're bound to see some decline in the public school setting. We've also seen a decline due to charter schools, folks looking at other options, and so that's some piece of it. If we're honest with ourselves, some piece of the decline has to do with our poor performance, and that's just truth. Again, as I said earlier, depending on where you went to school and at what time you went to school, your story about your education in JPS would be very different from someone else's. And so we've seen those declines over the years. Given those trends, this trend with our enrollment, we simply can't continue to do school as usual. We've got to be honest about our current reality and the ways that we can restructure ourselves to better serve our scholars' needs. So what is optimizing for equity? This is a 3-year plan or proposal to redesign our district and to better utilize our resources and to fortify and accelerate and support our efforts around our strategic plan, Excellence for All. It includes, and we'll get into this more deeply in a few, but expanding the pre-K access at McWillie, which is directly related to commitment number 1 in the plan, a strategic plan, a strong start. Repurposing Van Winkle as a pre-kindergarten center to serve especially our scholars in South Jackson. Again, commitment number 1, a strong start. Also closing Bar and merging with Pecan Park Elementary. That's commitment number 2, providing, and that's around innovative teaching and learning, but it's also a look at and a focus on maintaining fiscal sustainability. Consolidating Sywell and Cardozo middle schools starts to approach and support commitment number 2, and specifically around equitable access to resources. And the same with Hardy and Blackburn middle schools, commitment number 2, equitable resources or access to resources. Repurposing the Rowan Middle School as a district-wide center for teaching and learning as we look at and focus on commitment number 3, this opportunity to build talented and empowered teams and share the learning across the district. This will move us much further down the road to have such a center that would facilitate that ongoing learning, professional learning. And then lastly, this commissioning a task force to support the planning effort around the Lanier high school feeder pattern, not just Lanier High School, the feeder pattern, which would help to address enrollment, the facilities, as well as academic programming. This obviously supports our efforts around building and sustaining school communities that work and that are thriving. Again, it's clear through conversations that we've already had with all of our stakeholders, through the reports that have been written, the focus groups, and on with stakeholders across the board, that we're all desiring to put our scholars in the best position for success. Now, we don't always agree on what that path is, but it's clear that we agree that we've got to position our young folks for a greater success as we move forward. So I want to talk now about the elementary components to this redesign proposal, and they include McWillie, most acutely, McWillie, Van Winkle, and Bar. A big piece of the focus on elementaries, these elementary schools, is around an expansion of pre-kindergarten. And many of you will recall that there was a report that was done, commissioned by the Better Together Commission. And in there were a couple of really, really powerful quotes that had to do with early childhood education. And I'll read these just for emphasis. During the community sessions and on surveys, participants overwhelmingly agreed that comprehensive early childhood education is important because it helps prepare the children for school. Also stated, for those parents who did not have children that participated in early childhood education programs, the reason cited most often was availability. And so there's both this general consensus that early childhood education is not just coloring, is not just playtime, it's powerful and necessary, and that we have an issue with availability, and one that we must address. That again was taken from the One Voice report, canvassing report that was done about a year ago. In addition, as we think about this expansion of pre-K, we look at kindergarten readiness, and Dr. Cormack mentioned this a little bit before, but as we think about and look at all of the known kind of known offerings or providers so to speak, of experiences. Not all of them are specifically education focused, but experiences that young people have had before they've arrived with us in kindergarten. And you see that there's a variety of those. JPS, pre-K classes for those young people, and we have 600, at the time that this snapshot was taken, 637 of them who were enrolled in our pre-K programming. The average score on the MCAS readiness benchmark is 532.1. The readiness is benchmarked at 530. And so the average score for our scholars was at 530, just above that benchmark level. And with no disrespect to our partners in this work, because it is very difficult work, very important work, but ours was the only that had an average score above the benchmark threshold. And so in addition to our desire to expand pre-kindergarten offerings within JPS, there's a specific call out in our larger strategic plan to partner more closely, and you heard a bit about this earlier, to partner more closely with the providers outside of Jackson Public Schools. But wanted to really zero in on, this is, again, not just about childcare. This is not just about playtime. It's not just about coloring. There's some real academic benefits that are gained when our young people experience pre-kindergarten educational experiences. And so, again, McWillie is one of the schools that is directly impacted by the proposal that we're making here tonight, board members. And there are a few kind of pieces to this that I want to share. One, we're proposing an expansion of pre-kindergarten offerings at McWillie. And based on our count and the capacity of the building, we can increase by 5 sections of pre-kindergarten classes, which is about 100 4-year-olds added to the school. In addition, and this was noted earlier, due to a low enrollment in 6th grade at McWillie, we are proposing that we discontinue service or end the Montessori program at 5th grade, at the end of 5th grade, and allow our scholars who are 6th graders to enter the middle school program, which we believe is better suited for them given where they are in their developmental stage. This proposal also, just parenthetically, but it bears stating, also supports fortifying the kindergarten program at Boyd Elementary by reducing the number of transitions that those young people would have. Currently, those classes are housed at McWillie, although they are Boyd students. And so by moving those kindergarten classrooms back to Boyd, we'd reduce the transitions that those young folks are having, which is kind of a no-brainer, but we have this opportunity to address it, and we need to. The next school included in this or addressed in this proposal is Van Winkle. And just for your information, just wanted to share the decline in enrollment here at Van Winkle. It's been declining over some years, but I'll tell you the larger argument here and the focus here around Van Winkle is the opportunity to serve our pre-K students. That building, and some of you know this, that Van Winkle building was modeled and designed with Montessori programming in mind, and with the kinds of collaborative teaching and community educational experiences in mind there, as well with restrooms, close proximity to the classrooms. And these are all state requirements that we would have for pre-K programs and for pre-K classrooms. And so the building is ripe to serve a school full of 4-year-olds, amazing 4-year-olds. So again, with the design of the site, we wouldn't need to do much retrofitting at all in order to serve the young people there. We would serve young people basically in South Jackson, specifically in the Provine, Jim Hill, Forest Hill, Wingfield high school feeder patterns. And the scholars who are currently being served at Van Winkle would be rezoned to Clausel and Bates elementary schools. We're already working on the rezone maps should the board support this proposal, because we wanted to make sure that we were getting ahead with all of the logistics that'll have to be worked out. I should also state here, though, that this proposal does not necessitate or envision us removing pre-kindergarten, general education pre-kindergarten classes in other schools. We would like to have as many as possible. And our goal here is to, as Dr. Cormack mentioned earlier, we have this opportunity to nearly double the pre-kindergarten seats with this proposal. And so we're not looking to remove others, but to add to the sum total so that more and more of the young people in Jackson are served. Just to note, there's currently an English language learner program that is situated at Van Winkle, and that would be, that and the related supports would be shifted to Bates Elementary School. We're already collaborating with the county Human Resource Agency, which is the key Head Start provider, just to help us to think through some opportunities and to do some initial planning on how we might work together to better support the young people and their families. We'd also look to provide more inclusive services for young people, these 4-year-olds at the Van Winkle site. I'll also note it's as important as it is to start early in educating, formally educating young people, is also really, really important. And frankly, starting early gives us an opportunity to identify any special needs much earlier on, so that we're not waiting a couple of years to start to intervene and provide additional resources. But the earlier we start, the better opportunities we have to support those young people in their learning. Transportation, exceptional education services would continue to be provided to the young people. We should also note that just as any other scholars here in the district and families, they have an opportunity to apply for the special programs at Casey for grades K through 5, Power APAC grades 4 and 5, and Obama Magnet grades K through 5. The third elementary school impacted most acutely by this proposal is Barr Elementary School. And although we've got kind of a trend line showing there, I'll just kind of caution us to still note that this school has been for many years far under enrolled. It's a beautiful space. The building itself has major issues, but it's beautiful space because of the work that the educators have done there to create that beautiful warm space. It's been grossly under enrolled for years. And although there was the spike in 2017, fall 2017, where we consolidated the Poindexter scholars in with Barr, we've experienced a dip again since then. And so we're compelled that this is not something that we can continue in order to, as we continue striving to do our very best to educate our young people. And so what does the proposal include in terms of the Barr Elementary School? We would propose closing it effective July 2020. Again, due to the enrollment, decline, but the extremely low enrollment there. But also there are major building issues. The entire first or basement floor is just not usable, including the cafeteria. We just don't have those as options for us. The current approximately 140 or so Barr students would attend Pecan Park Elementary, which is an A-rated school by the Mississippi Department of Education. So for those who are concerned about their young people going from a school that is high performing, we were mindful of that as we considered, actually, as we considered all of these transitions. And here again, for those living in the bar school zone, transportation would be provided. And again, as with any scholars in the district, the families may apply for special program school enrollment at KC, Power APAC, Obama Magnet. So those were the elementary kind of components to this proposal. The middle school components, in the middle school components, there are essentially two school consolidations, Sywell and Cardozo, and then Hardy and Blackburn. And I'll talk a little bit about those and give some background data now. First off, these consolidations, while the schools are seriously under-enrolled, these consolidations at middle school, we're thinking about these in terms of some pretty amazing opportunities that we have to increase the experiences and improve on the experiences that the young people have. And they're simply stated here. One, enhanced teacher collaboration, opportunities to really build out teams where teachers can build and learn from one another as they're doing their work. Greater equity in course and elective offerings is a huge issue across our schools, and we've got to ensure that we are being more equitable with these resources and opportunities. As well, increased access to certified teachers with fewer classrooms, thereby fewer teachers to teach in those classrooms. There's a shorter, or there are fewer teachers or certified teachers that we must find and recruit in order to teach in those classrooms. And then lastly, the fiscal savings for staffing, that is just pretty mind-boggling as we think about it. And so thinking about it, as we look at first Sywell and Cardozo, just looking at staffing, and that's not even all of the staff, but just looking at the leadership or administration and the teachers. If you look down the column under Sywell, then you see more than $2.4 million being spent at Sywell. 400 students, $2.4 million being spent there. You look at Cardozo, with 418 students, just looking, considering the administrative team and the teacher team, and that's inclusive of the electives, spending about almost $2.3 million. In a combined site, serving about 818 scholars, modeling out the number of teachers that we anticipate needing for, and this is only factoring in our student-teacher ratio of 24:1. So this isn't even as high as the state allows in terms of the cap. Just factoring in with a 24:1 ratio, student-to-teacher ratio, with that number of 59 to 61 teachers, with that student ratio and with increased elective offerings, the range of spending would be somewhere between 3.7 and 3.9 million in the combined site. So the current combined cost, what we're currently spending at those two schools, Hardy and Cardozo, 4.7 million, more than 4.7 million. The potential savings in a consolidation, and again, that's with a ratio of 24:1. The potential savings near $1 million. And again, this is just focused on the admin and teacher costs. That's not an all-in cost, but just looking at staffing, that's the savings there. And then of course, the cost of heating and cooling two buildings, or one building versus two buildings. Those would be factored in as well. Now let's look at Hardy and Blackburn. Hardy with 382 students. Currently, the spend rate is about $2.6 million. Blackburn, 369 students, spending about $2.4 million. Combined, we'd have about 751 scholars that we'd serve, and with, again, the 24-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio, and with increased electives, the spending, the range of spending would be somewhere in the order of 3.6 to 3.8 million. And before I move on to the big reveal here, this, I can share this. So the current combined costs over $5 million for running those two buildings. And the potential savings here in a combined or a consolidated state, over $1 million, close to or up to 1.4 million, again, just on staffing, admin and teachers. And the thing that I want to note here, and I'll go back just so that you can see it here. We've got to, I want to just note that the reality in the costs of teachers and the costs of administrators is going to be a bit variable, which is why we have this range here, because of the salaries, the actual salaries that folks are making. You have, in some schools where it's been hard to find and staff with teachers, you've got a lot of novice teachers with lower salaries. And in some schools with more stable staff, you've got teachers who've been with us for several years, who tenured, more veteran, and so those salaries would be a bit more. I just wanted to call that out just as, in case folks are looking at these numbers and saying, oh, I don't know how this works out. That's part of the challenge that we have, but it's also an opportunity for us to fortify and to have more stable staff. I won't spend too much time on this, just to accentuate this point about building enrollment and capacity at Sywell. We're current enrollment around 400, where they have over 1,000 student capacity in the building. Cardozo, about 418 in enrollment, capacity is 975. Combining them, we're at about 818 scholars to be served in the building, still far less than the full capacity, which allows us room to grow or just room to spread out in the building, so we're not right up on one another. And obviously the buildings were built to serve, those higher numbers of scholars. Looking now at Hardy and Blackburn, again, 382 with Hardy, with a capacity of over 1,000. 369 currently enrolled at Blackburn with a capacity of 900. Together, 751. Again, not filled to the brim, but filling the school to the point where we can have some wonderful economies of scale and really build out programming and offerings. Per pupil expenditure. Now, this information is taken from the most recent ESSA report, Every Student Succeeds Act report, which shares an all-in kind of number, all of the resourcing and all of the expenditures for public school. And so as you look at the per pupil, what we're spending per pupil in these buildings, we added Chastain here just as a point of reference. Please, no one run out and say that Chastain was part of the proposal. It's just for reference sake. The spending at Chastain is $8,800 or just over $8,800 per pupil. And the Chastain enrollment is over 600. And then you look at Blackburn and Hardy and Sywell and Cardozo, each of them quite a bit higher than the Chastain per pupil expenditure. And again, although we know that the needs of the scholars within a particular school start to drive some of the dollars that come into the school, if there are more students with special education needs and that sort of thing, you start to get more dollars into the school. But even with that, the point still remains that we've got inequitable spending across our schools. And there's an opportunity for us to shore that up. And so the proposal for our middle schools, we propose that we would close Sywell and Hardy middle schools at the end of this school year. Sywell would be merged with the newer and more updated building, or Cardozo School in the Cardozo building. The Sywell scholars who were zoned, those Sywell scholars who live north of Highway 80 would be rezoned to Blackburn. So there's a slight little adjustment that we'd be making in the school zones, just as we look at their proximity to the two different schools and bus routes and all of those things. It makes sense to kind of fix that one segment of town. Hardy would be merged with the newer and updated Blackburn School in the Blackburn building, and these mergers would enhance, as we shared earlier, our building utilization, would help us to be better stewards of our resources, and the net impact to scholars as we look at their course offerings and stability in staffing would be greatly improved. Specifically looking at the course offerings, as we have continued to look across our schools, what we're currently offering and the differences from school to school, and looking at our own commitments to both in especially in the Strategic Plan Excellence for All, there are three offerings that we're confident that we can offer to in these consolidated schools in both cases to ensure that our young people have greater equity: health, Spanish, and art. Now, art is offered in some schools, but not in others. And that's one of the things, again, we want greater consistency. As we think about the middle school scholar and where they are in their lives, developmentally appropriate education for them, we've got to make sure that they're experiencing health education. We have to do that. That can't be perhaps if we can offer it in this school. That's got to be a consistent. Also, we're developing our young people, preparing them to go out into the world and do great things in the world. As we think about global citizenship, one of the things that we've got to be much more determined and deliberate about is increasing their language skills. Foreign language skills. And so this is a commitment, and we're delivering on a commitment number 2, in fact, to provide for that, and the same with art. Transportation, exceptional education services would be provided, of course. And then, as you heard from some folks earlier today, and as we certainly heard in the parent meetings that we've held over the last couple of weeks, there's a real need for, and we agree, an opportunity for us to intentionally develop relationships as we march towards the fall. And so again, if you board members should approve of this proposal, then we would be working over the spring and summer to create intentional opportunities for young people to get to know one another across school communities and start to build those relationships that will be so powerful as they show up together in the fall in a classroom with new friends that they can learn alongside. As we kind of start to close this proposal out, there are two components that are kind of focused on the high school and the district level, JPS district. The first has to do with our teaching and learning and the Center for Teaching and Learning. The proposal here is that in accordance with our strategic plan and the commitments we've made there, that we'd repurpose the Rowan Middle School as a district-wide world-class teaching and learning center. The students who are currently enrolled in our REAP program there, we would relocate them just next door to the Brown school building, which is currently shuttered and not being utilized. And so we'd utilize that building and likely build out programming there, because there's certainly a need for more and more programming for overaged, undercredited scholars. The renovations or enhancements to Rowan would occur over the next school year, and by fall 2021, we would open that center. Some of the benefits to the center, one, we are looking at the opportunity to create some revenue by hosting the professional development offerings there, decreasing the need to go out to other venues to host our professional development, which we are constantly doing, we're often doing. We can host actual seminars and conferences and things in our own space and invite not just our internal folks, educators, but those from around the metro area or even the state. And then lastly, there's even an opportunity for us to create a full service cafeteria option for the professional development participants. So there are opportunities here to think more creatively about this, that space, and even about this focus on professional learning. Lanier High School. Many folks have suggested or assumed that Lanier would be impacted by any proposal having to do with or based on the enrollment there. It's no secret that we've seen considerable decrease or decline in enrollment at Lanier High School. And perhaps if we looked across the feeder pattern in the feeder pattern. That's clear to us. And what's also clear to me, unlike the other schools that are noted in this proposal, that the issues at Lanier, whether it's from the enrollment side, the course offerings and themes, the focus of the school, and for sure the facilities, that all of that would take much more than the next 6 months or year to address. We've got to step back and look across the feeder pattern at Lanier and think more critically about who do we want to be. We've got this budding positioned already, this health sciences health sciences academy there. We've got some technology there. We've got a partnership already there. There are opportunities to really build that out, but there are also major needs. And we've got to ensure that that facility and that the programming are so compelling that there's no question that folks in that area and perhaps even from other areas in the city would want to attend Lanier. And so the proposal here is that we would take some time over the next 5 months through the end of this school year to engage with a group of stakeholders and some of our internal educators to help to build out a plan, a comprehensive, really robust plan that would totally re-envision what is education at Lanier, in the Lanier feeder pattern, and all things would be on the table except closure or chartering the school. And so mergers, perhaps, maybe not. Rethinking the focus, perhaps, maybe not. Certainly rethinking the facility itself and the utilization of and ways to rethink that space, all of that would be on the table. And so the charge would be, that we put out would be to come up with a plan, a robust plan that would be so compelling that anyone would want to attend there. And one of the reasons why we're considering or why we're proposing that we take this approach with Lanier, one is that if we do our job right in the planning along with the stakeholders, this will likely require more resources than we currently have in our coffers. And so the planning effort plus fundraising effort will likely take some time. We've got a signal now, though, that we can't continue steady state. And so, again, this proposal specifically names that we've got to put a stake in the ground. What are we going to do? What are we going to be? How are we going to best serve our young people? And what will that require of us as we prepare over time? And just to be clear, and so the launch of this newly envisioned Lanier High School, Lanier feeder pattern would launch in the fall of 22, giving us the remainder of this year for planning and then 2 years out for both fundraising, facilities enhancements, and fully developing the programming there and staffing and all the other pieces. So, as you know, there are lots of kind of big steps and logistics and details to be attended to for something like this. not the least of which is really important, not only to our internal team, but as we've heard from our parents, to the larger community. Folks want to know that we would take good care of our Team JPS members. And so our human resources team, should this go forward, would be working one-on-one with our team members, our current team members, any impacted by these proposed changes, to support them in identifying the needs at the consolidated schools or at totally new schools, to help them to land softly. Also, with our classified staff, the directors and those who are leading in the operations departments, they've been looking very closely at staffing, looking very closely at attrition, and even current vacancies. And they too would have that concierge customer service approach to support them in landing in roles within JPS. And we're confident that based on the attrition that we typically see, that all of our staff members will land with us. I want to be very clear that we are a people industry. We are a people business. And so we can't do this work without the people. And while we are convicted that these changes that we're proposing here are best for children, and children have to be first, we're also confident that if we don't do right by our educators, that we will have missed an opportunity to really build on what we believe is good and right for young people. For those who have not already been to our website to see the information that's posted there, we have information posted on the website towards the bottom of the home page. There's also a place where you can click to find our frequently asked questions. With all of the parent meetings, we've been culling questions and seeing definitely some trends and some overlaps in the questions that have been asked. But using those to continue to build out the frequently asked questions and answering those there. So we invite folks to go there for more information or to be reminded of what we've shared this evening. We will continue with family meetings this week. We'll continue with collecting comment cards and getting those questions to get those questions answered on our website. And board members, per your request, we are coming to you tonight for information only, and would be coming back at the next appointed board meeting on January the 7th with the final proposal and asking for board action.